Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for being here. My name is Chelsea. I'm the Director of Outreach at MADVoters. I'm very excited to be sharing this Zoom with you today, talking to these panelists. It's going to be all about environmental issues here in Indiana, and we're just going to hop right into it. And I'm going to ask Kelly to go ahead and introduce herself.
Yeah, hi everyone. So excited to be here. I'm Kelly Hamman. I work with Citizens Action Coalition. We're a nonprofit consumer and environmental advocacy group. We were founded here in Indiana back in 1974. So this is our 50th year fighting for affordable utility rates and a healthier environment. A big part of our work is with utility issues. They keep us pretty darn busy, but excited to be here.
Indiana, right? Amanda, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Amanda Eldridge, and I am a candidate running for a county council at large in Tippecanoe County. I live in Battleground, and I'm just trying to give a seat at the table for the smaller communities.
Thank you, Amanda. Christopher, please.
Hello, y'all. Christopher Norrick, he, him. I am based down in Evansville, Indiana, and I consider myself a solar advocate. I do work for a national nonprofit that advocates for residential solar. However, today I am here as a personal citizen, not representing an employer or any particular group. I'm also an organizer for the Direct Action Against Centerpoint Energy group that we have down here in Evansville, who fight against our local monopoly oppressive utility that does nothing but raise our rates and pollute our water and air. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on our side. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Michael Potter. I'm running for the House of Representatives, Indiana House District 47, which is Johnson and Shelby counties. I'm an environmental consultant and licensed professional geologist. I've been practicing for 25 years, primarily in soil and groundwater remediation. I also do emergency response to environmental incidents, whether it be like a Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy situation, or a train derailed or a pipeline release.
Interesting. Thank you. So we're going to hop right into it, and we're going to start with the LEAP project because this is a really, really big deal in our state right now for the people who know what's going on. There are still a lot of people who have no idea what's happening. And Amanda, I know you in particular, where you're located, you are hearing from your constituents and your community members how worried they are. Would you care to share some of that with us?
Yes. So just to go over real quickly what the LEAP project is that in Lebanon, the IEDC, the Indiana Economic Development Committee, had the bright idea to put in a chip manufacturer facility, which in theory is great, except this specific manufacturer needs a lot of water that Lebanon in that area just doesn't have. So they decided what they were going to do is pipe a 43-mile pipeline from an aquifer in Tippecanoe County and pump 100 million gallons of water a day all the way to Lebanon. Well, no one really knew what was going on. When people started hearing about it, they were upset. They did a test run and it drained wells within about a 2-mile radius. So now people there are dealing with sulfur, with silt in their water, discoloration. Everyone in this area across the entire political spectrum, even people not involved in politics, is upset. They're concerned about water quality, whether we have enough water to really fund this, why this manufacturer was even put in the area. I do know recently that the commissioners in my county just put another moratorium on large wells for a year. The one that they had done was only scheduled for 9 months and was set to expire, but they put it on for another year to at least attempt at the local level to put a pause on it.
Thank you for sharing that. I am still learning about the LEAP project myself. There just seems to be a lot of stuff that we still don't know. And so it's going to be interesting to watch any of this unfold. And are any of you guys hearing anything about the LEAP project concerns?
For me, the LEAP project's one of the reasons I decided to run for the House of Representatives here in Indiana. due to some of the comments I heard from legislators and people involved. It's obvious that they don't have the required environmental experience to be making these decisions. And it sort of occurred to me that we need more scientists in our legislature to be able to help with this. Water issues are not going to go away for Indiana. It's going to become more of a problem across a larger portion of the state. And it's not really that we have a lack of water, but it is a sharing issue. The other thing I'll say is they went about, and I think the others will probably say similar, they went about this all wrong. Not only do they have bad science, but it's just bad business to do the practices that they were doing, which, if anything, they're supposed to be business people and understand how to operate a good business. And they couldn't even do that part right. So yeah, great. I want all the businesses here. I want the chip manufacturing. I want all that. Of course, working for an environmental engineering firm, you got a challenge. Let's go. Let's try to be as net zero as possible, or actual zero or negative. But they need to have approached it better, and we may get into that with some other issues here as well.
Excellent points. And I'd say Citizens Action Coalition has a number of concerns, and we highlighted those in a report, I think it was last December, which is on our website. So it's a great resource, kind of a deep dive, echoing their points about water concerns and the fact that the public really wasn't involved beforehand, which is the opposite of how we should be conducting business. CAC, we're also concerned about where is the energy going to come from? What's going to happen to the hazardous waste that will be produced by the chip manufacturer and others? And what's going to happen to the wastewater? How are we going to handle that? All of that comes against the backdrop of we don't know who's going to be forced to pick up the tab for some of this stuff. The pipeline could be, I think, $2 billion from Lafayette to Lebanon. And we have concerns that water utility customers could end up footing the bill based off of some legislation passed by the State House. So lots of concerns and lots of unanswered questions.
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, you brought up something that was stated, which is what are they going to do with the waste that's coming from this? Like, where's it going to go? We're going to pump it back into an aquifer, a river. I mean, I think most of us know Indiana, we rank pretty low in water quality, water that's safe to be in. So adding this in is very concerning. I know just lack of transparency has been an issue to the point the city of Lebanon is currently being sued by a company, I think it was South Carolina that was going to build something there. So they're going after Lebanon for $25 million right now. So the transparency outside of the environmental aspect is a big concern. And the fact that the IEDC tried to run the test on the water. It's like, I can make a report sound however I want it to if I'm the one in charge.
See,
Well,
go ahead. Go ahead, Michael.
I have to say, there should be plenty of water, right? That was what the initial report said. They're still working on it. It's a big aquifer, and there's been a lot of talk about that. So, again, it should be possible, but they've gone about it all wrong. And so, if they had just taken the time and the diligence to talk to the neighbors, talk to the cities, work it out, I mean, it's just unfortunate they put themselves in such a bad spot for no reason, but they're just, well, they don't know what they're doing. I mean, they have the wrong people in charge of the wrong things, and they're not asking the right questions. And, again, that's why I decided to run. And all these points that are being brought up, hazardous waste, re-injection into the aquifer, which the waste definitely would not be injected back into that Wabash Valley aquifer, or definitely shouldn't. I shouldn't say it won't be, because the direction they're going, it hasn't been good. But it is a good aquifer. It is likely to get utilized in the future, whether it's for Lafayette or Lebanon or rural areas northwest of Lafayette as those get developed. So, I hate to I'm pro-business. Indiana's, I just saw, I think it was MADVoters put out that, we've been a business-friendly community or state for a number of years, and that's been great for our clients. Most of them still do the right thing, but it is nice to not be hounded to levels that aren't scientifically backed. Everything is risk-based on the risk to the human health and the environment. But I'd really like to see a better discussion of moving people's wells if it's within the capture radius of the pumping wells, or just pumping from different areas. Why do they have to do it in somebody's backyard? I mean, it's a long river and a long aquifer. They didn't have to go right into somebody's backyard to do those tests.
Yes, wanted to add in, this is not my area of expertise, but one of my favorite YouTube channels, Climate Town, just had a whole long episode about water issues, mostly centered around out west, but it goes into all of these topics about poor policy, why is it this way? This makes no sense, and just gives you a little bit better background about some of these water issues. And he's a climate scientist as well, so it's just not some guy on YouTube spouting his mouth off. It's Climate Town.
Yeah, and I think another big issue in my area is the fact there is really no water legislation in Indiana. Like, in theory, nothing could stop me from pumping water to Illinois, which is going to cause an issue. I know when I go visit people in northern Indiana and talk about this, they're horrified. They're like, wait, that could happen in my area. And it's like, it could. So please get involved, talk to your legislators, support people like Michael who are running that would actually support good policy at the state level. But that has been a big issue that I've heard from constituents.
So we had a question in the chat that somebody asked, did they have to do an environmental impact study? Or because it was a test, did they not have to do anything? Or was that part of the environmental impact study?
They don't, as far as I know, they don't have like a NEPA, like what they do with the highways, or I guess if they were to do the pipeline, they would need to do one for sure. But just to test a well, no. So there's a lot of steps there. I mean, they just jumped the shark on this one.
Yeah, it seems like it's been overcomplicated, something that shouldn't have to be, right? Okay.
Correct.
Very interesting. I'm already learning more than I did. Thank you.
I want to throw this in there real quickly. I was chaperoning a trip out west for 3 weeks with high school students, and I had a guy tell me, and this was like 30 years ago, hey, if you're going to get into geology, you want to get into water law. Did I listen? No. Did I ever listen to seniors when I was in early college? No. And where am I? I'm not in water law. So maybe I need to get back to law school and work on that legislation.
That's interesting. But that is also why it's important for us to watch legislation, because they do these things right under our noses. And if we're not paying attention, stuff like this happens. We don't have legislation to stop stuff like this from happening. So very important. You guys know MADVoters, we're all about watching the legislation. So I'm glad that got brought up. So another thing that is an issue in Indiana, which we kind of talked a little bit before we got started, talking about things like electric power, solar power. There's a lot of misinformation out there about these things. Those of you who are talking to regular everyday Hoosiers a little bit more often, what is the kind of misinformation that you're hearing, and what can you say that's going to debunk that? Like, is there anything, like maybe a big sticking point that you hear often that you are like, let's get this straight on the record right now?
One note we hear fairly regularly is there's just not enough sunshine in Indiana, which kind of blows me away because we grow so much crops here. Just sort of the disparity of that. And so we often point them towards Germany, who is sort of recognized as a world leader in solar energy production. And we have quite almost double the amount of solar power per square meter than they do. So, I mean, that one's a really easy one to debunk with some pretty solid science that, I mean, look, we have the national lab that shows us how much energy will hit this little square spot of land on my particular rooftop. So it's pretty easy to debunk. That's a strange one.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know if I've heard that one before, but yeah, I mean, that's probably what I would think immediately is, well, gosh, I'm surrounded by fields where I live and everything's growing really well right now.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Christopher. And I think in that vein, it's not maybe misinformation, but I think we get so much of our energy from fossil fuels. I think it's at like 75 to 80%. So what we hear about a lot are folks being concerned with what they perceive to be contamination from solar farms or wind farms. And what I come back to is the fact that Indiana has the most coal ash ponds in the entire country. And we know that those coal ash ponds are leaching toxic things into our groundwater right now and have been for a really long time. And they're sitting next to major waterways like the Wabash River, the White River, the Ohio River, and NIPSCO's got a coal ash pond that's just right on Lake Michigan. So when we look at the risks to public health and our environment, we really need to be focused on that. Because that's the risk that's in front of us in this moment that's documented and well understood.
I mean, panels are made of aluminum, glass, silicon, and a little bit of wiring. There's not a whole lot to really leach even when you look at some of the circuitry, it's been calculated that, I mean, there's less toxic materials in a solar panel than there is in like your cell phone. I mean, so it's just one of those things like what could be leaching off of that? Some of it doesn't make any sense. And that's definitely one of them, the leaching aspect. And I guess the flip side of that is that we do hear about the recyclability of some of these, are we filling up landfills? And I think that technology is emerging. There's already a few companies tackling that. And there is a domestic manufacturer, Q Cells, that promotes that their panels are 95% recyclable. So that's pretty amazing because there are some valuable things in there, a lot of valuable minerals that they want to get back out of those panels to make a circular economy for those. So we're not relying so much on mining in foreign countries that we just don't know exactly what's happening and what the labor market looks like over there and what conditions exist. And it could contribute to some unintended consequences with how those materials are produced. And I think the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, went a long way to encourage that. So they have put some tariffs in place against some Chinese-made panels and have encouraged domestic production for a lot of that stuff, including battery production, which we haven't really touched on, but that's another key thing in the Inflation Reduction Act to encourage domestic manufacturing and build a manufacturing base here that we desperately need.
You want to piggyback on that recycling point because Indiana passed a law, I think it was 2023, that at least forced us to study recycling solar panels and wind turbines. And we supported that bill because sure, let's do it. There has been no similar legislation passed about recycling components from coal plants or fossil gas plants or nuclear plants. So there can be a bit of a disparity in the focus on recycling these new technologies when we haven't really thought that much about existing sources of power that we've used for many, many years.
Yeah, I'll say we have solar on our rooftop of our home, and we just bit the bullet. We had a little bit of, I wouldn't say it's, we had cash, it wasn't extra cash, but we had some cash from a home sale, and we just said, if we don't do it now, we're not going to pull the did, and it was designed for 70% of the previous homeowners' use. We didn't know what we would use. So we're like, okay, that's good. We have room to add, but we'll start with that. And it's performed right to the T of what they said it would. I mean, it's just great. And it saves us money. I mean, some months there's no energy use. When it's 90 degrees and super high humidity and the sun's beaming, hey, let's pump that air conditioner. I mean, there's other issues with that, but at least, it's not like just skyrocketing our bill. That sun that's causing the heat is also giving us energy. So to me, it's the way around so many things. We've talked to builders, not only for homes for us, but for business buildings. And some of the local Indiana builders are, one had said, solar panels are not our aesthetic. It's like, you mean like a charred globe is your aesthetic? Like, come on, guys. Like, and we just got to, keep doing what we do and promoting it, getting it on homes where we can. Hopefully we'll come around and it will continue to pick up. The federal legislation and some of the money there is definitely going to go a long way to help, especially low income. There's definitely some good programs for people that barely can afford to stay in their house, but by being able to get solar on their house, that's going to help them with their energy bills in the future, and that's so important.
Yeah, the solar for all provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, are going to be very key to making solar power the energy justice tool that it can be, that we expect it to be, in areas that have the highest energy burdens, have not had access to these technologies for, all of the reasons. That it's going to be huge. And Indiana got a significant amount of money to accomplish that. And it's going to be rolling out in the next 5 years. I mean, some of it will be rolling out next year, which is very exciting to see.
So without the use of solar panels and things like that, 79% of Indiana's electricity is produced by fossil fuels. This is growing more expensive, and these increased costs are getting passed on to residential customers, all while public officials delay meaningful investments in renewables and energy efficiency. So Hoosiers are suffering, right? They're suffering, and they have all of these issues with the aesthetic, right? But we look around and we're losing land to these residential spaces as well. What can you tell us about that? Can any of you share, maybe talking about the increased costs? I know some of you are from different areas. I know in Southern Indiana, the costs have, skyrocketed, and people are just absolutely terrified right now. Chris, I see you nodding your head.
I'll let Kelly go first.
Thanks. This is a big topic, and I'm kind of hearing two avenues. One is, empowering people to benefit from putting solar on their homes. And I saw Katie mention in the chat net metering, which our legislature decided to phase out with Senate Enrolled Act 309. I think that's from 2017. We lost net metering, which is a fair way to credit people for the excess solar power they send onto the grid. And that was a move that benefits the utility companies and not the people of this state. The other avenue that we have is utility scale solar. So your utility company choosing to build a big solar farm. And that can, if that's done the right way, that can really help people save money on their bills as well, right? Compared to different types of generation. And then there's sort of the avenue that we'd like to see expand here in Indiana, and that's community solar, which if we could authorize independent community solar here in Indiana, that would enable someone who's not a utility to put up panels, a collection of panels, on, existing rooftops, right? And it would allow people to subscribe to get power from that so that they can save money on their bills. So we have a lot of options, but the issue is getting the political will on the side of the people and our environment. And sometimes at the State House, that's a challenge.
I'd like to add a little bit on to community solar. Some of the money that's coming from the IRA is dedicated to community solar installs. And I think it's a concept that a lot of folks don't quite have an understanding of or never really heard of. And it's exactly what Kelly said. You know, it's an independent, so not the utility company would install it, operate it. It can be community owned and operated. It can be a nonprofit owned and operated, which is we would like to see with carve outs for low and moderate income folks, so they can access cheaper renewable power and not be so reliant on the monopoly system that we currently have in Indiana. Unfortunately, in Indiana, there's no enabling legislation that allows a market to exist. So everything has to go through the utility company, and they can just say no, and they have. In a few cases, you have to negotiate with each one of them to get sort of a community solar install in place. And so what we really need is actual legislation that puts up guardrails, lays out the plan, and so independent solar contractors can come here and build some of these systems, and folks can start subscribing to them who may not be able to afford solar on their roof, may not own their roof, may have shade, may not have the right orientation, all of those limiting factors that prevent a lot of folks from going solar who want to. So this is an avenue that I'm very excited about. I hope we had some legislation in the State House last year. It did not get a committee hearing, which is very unfortunate. It was a good piece of legislation. And so we'll see what happens this year, because there's going to be a big push for it because there's money on the table and we do not want to leave it behind.
Break the supermajority, folks, voters out there. Is there an example, Chris, of a state with like your ideal legislation on that?
A red state, probably not. It is currently in 22 states. Most of them are blue states. However, Alaska just passed a law, which is a fairly red state. I've not looked at it. I don't know the details of their particular form of community solar. I think Minnesota is a really good example. Of course, most of these have a lot of carve-outs for low and moderate income folks that may not fly here, at least mandated. Maybe we can get away with some soft language like maybe we should look into that, or you can have the ability to do that and not mandate it. We'll see. It's tough. I mean, this is the state that killed net metering when it was less than 0.001% market penetration. I mean, essentially nosedived the solar industry, the local mom and pop shops in this state. I mean, completely obliterated it. It's very tough to see. And so when you're in that kind of environment, getting something like this passed is very difficult. And there's been several attempts that have not gone very far.
So, Chris, I actually have, and maybe Kelly, you can answer this, at a more local level, like a county or a municipal, what are things that we could do to kind of help support this? And also onto that, is it easier to work with companies like Duke, or do we want to look at more of an REMC situation?
Well, I think REMCs are able to offer community solar in Indiana, but
Okay.
it's the large investor-owned electric utilities that I think can do it, but they're just not.
Okay.
And so at the local level, I think it's always important to talk to your elected officials at the Indiana State House because they hear a lot from the utility companies. I saw Katie typed a question about why are folks hesitant. The utilities like to make money, to be frank. And when we make our own power, that cuts into their very healthy profits, to be quite honest. And we want them to be financially healthy. They totally are. But it's time to balance out the needs of the people because folks are struggling to afford utility service, and distributed generation like rooftop solar or community solar can help us get there. So it might help to tell Duke that you support independent community solar, but it definitely helps to tell your legislators that you want that here in Indiana.
Well, I didn't know with running for county council, you will be allotting, this is budgetary, but money towards repairs to new buildings, things like that. If we want to put more of a focus on making sure that we're adding solar panels, I know when our community corrections was redone, they added solar, a small solar field there. Is that ways that, at a local level that we could help push to promote solar and maybe put a little more pressure on our state legislature?
That sounds beautiful. And I'm forgetting the city that did it on all of their municipal buildings. Southern Indiana on the way down to Madison. I just can't think of the name, but yeah, that keeps money in people's pockets in multiple ways. And we'd love to see that embraced all across the state.
There have been a few examples of putting solar on wastewater treatment plants that consume a ton of energy. And I mean, that's direct money into folks' pockets that are paying those sewer and water rates. I think that was a really great idea. There was a fairly major one that was installed in, I think it was Northwest Indiana a couple years ago. I just can't remember which city that was. That's a good local level policy.
Well, I've had some constituents ask, why don't we put solar panels on roads, like in medians and stuff like that? Do you think maybe if we did that, we could start afford to fix our roads? Put the money towards that?
Yeah, I don't know which country it is, but somebody has put, and they show it as a meme or just a single image, but down the median they have the solar panels up off the ground, and then the bike path underneath it. So not only are you getting shade when you're biking, but you're getting the solar and using that space between the two highways. So, I mean, there's so much space if we could just pass the legislation. This kind of leads me to, just the general thoughts about environmental, and that, well, one, we know they want to give back to these big businesses, right? Like, let me give the kickbacks or, whatever, as a legislator, potential legislator, it's like, wait, what kind of money are these guys getting back? Like they are pushing such terrible legislation, just in environmental, like, let alone what they're doing in other areas of our lives. But to me, any new build from today forward should have an energy plan with the request to build, whether it's during their zoning meeting, their water planning meeting. It should be, where are you getting your energy? Because we're not adding a coal-fired power plant to power Lily's business or the chip manufacturer in Leap or Leap in general, right? It would take a whole nother power plant to power that thing. And then the residential that's going to come with it. And nobody's talking about that. Like, you have to have a plan for energy before you start building.
Kelly can probably talk to this a little bit more, but I think one of the shocking things that we've seen lately with the announcement of some of these data centers coming and Bitcoin mining to Indiana is it is prolonging the retirement of coal-fired power plants, or in some cases restarting ones that have already been retired. And I'm still currently celebrating the fact that we shut down A.B. Brown, which is a huge one down here on the Ohio River that I looked at for 25 years going to work and back. Last October, that one went offline. However, they replaced it, and they're now building 2 gas-fired turbines in its place. So it was a win-loss kind of situation. And so that's I love that. I love to hear that. I think that's a great idea. Where are they going to get the energy? And it can't be from coal plants. It just can't.
That's such an excellent and timely example, Christopher, because we are seeing utilities in their 20-year energy plans called the Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. They basically say, this is how much power we're going to need and how we're going to provide it. And there are opportunities for the public to participate. So keep an eye on our website, because the more folks that engage, the better. But we are seeing utilities through that process kick back coal retirement dates, or be more interested in adding on more gas instead of cleaner options that are also not subject to price volatility like natural gas is, right? And then I'd say the other piece that we'd love to see is energy efficiency. Our state did away with a very successful statewide energy efficiency program. I think we ended it back via a law back in 2014, and it's cheaper to save energy than it is to make it. So it's Indiana has the opportunity to make choices that help our wallets as consumers, but also the air we breathe and the water we drink. But we got to come together to demand that we're making those choices that help the people, not just the big corporations.
And surely this is something that all Hoosiers care about, right? We all want to breathe clean air. We all want to drink clean water. We want to see our friends and our kids swimming in clean water, fishing in clean water. Um, and it looks like legislation is the answer, right, guys? I mean, that's that's what we kind of keep coming back to. And I want everybody who's on this call and who may hear this video later that getting involved is as easy as reaching out to your legislator. You know, if they don't hear from you, they don't know that you care about that, and they will use that to run over you. So don't give them the chance to do so. Speak up every time so they can't come out and say, well, I'm not hearing from my constituents. Because guess what? If we have hundreds of emails to prove that they are hearing from constituents, how great would it be to go and present that, right, in testimony? Well, here are 500 emails talking about our concerns. So what do you mean you're not hearing from your constituents? These are the things that we can do as just little people in our communities. Just, you know, we may not feel like we have a lot of power, but there is power in going to our legislators. So I want to say that because it comes back to legislation. Everybody on this panel is affected by legislation, is fighting for better legislation. It all comes back to that.
I mean, and you're right, Chelsea. I mean, and a great recent example of Hoosiers coming together and saying we're not okay with this. It's slightly off topic. Was the high school diplomas, getting all those changes made. It took so many parents, teachers, people in the community saying this is not okay. So if we can do that to a legislature who made that decision because of the what was it, the business commerce department, why can't we do it for environmental reasons?
Yeah, environment would certainly be something that would continue to be an issue if they stuck with that diploma, because you would be eliminating the little higher earth science, chemistry, physics, kind of the basic building blocks of how a solar panel works and how coal fire works and air pollution. So you'd keep the population a little more ignorant to be able to continue to just steamroll them on these issues. And along those lines, how I ended up in geology was totally that broad stroke education. And I definitely wouldn't have picked this out. I didn't know that I liked it in high school. I just kind of gravitated that way. I got scooped up by a good teacher and drug along to some things. And lo and behold, I became a geologist.
And it's interesting how everything's so interconnected. Our environmental issues can be connected to our community safety, our healthcare costs. I know I just found out how high radon is in Indiana, and that panic attack was something I didn't need. But that, can affect, lung cancer issues, COPD, which then puts more of a stress on our healthcare system and those financial costs. So it's very interesting when you start seeing how all interconnects, how important it is to make sure we have clean water, we have clean air, we have utilities that people can afford. It's not, do we pay for water this month or heat?
As someone who lives in the so-called sacrifice zone, 100% agree. We had 7 very large coal-fired power plants down here in the Ohio River Valley. It is a valley, and so it just traps everything down here. And yes, 100%. And then on the exact same topic, I did wear my Renewable Energy Day t-shirt that we had last February at the State House, where we brought folks from all over the state, showed up, and had legislator meetings in the State House. We're doing it again next year. Put it on your calendars, January 21st.
And I think go ahead, Mike.
Hopefully I'll already be there.
I was going to say, I think we've all talked about this, is just battling the misinformation that we hear from people in our community. Even something as simple as I've heard people say they don't want wind turbines because it's going to destroy the beauty of their view. To which I remind them, I'm sure someone said that 100 years ago when telephone poles were going up, but yet they still went up. But yeah, it's just having those conversations. Or we talked earlier about land use for solar power. Some people think we're taking away from our food, our farmlands, and as we discussed, we're losing most of that land to urban sprawl for those suburban areas. So I think it's just battling that misinformation.
And the other statistic on that same topic is, over 50% of Indiana corn goes towards ethanol production. So it's not even food. We're making energy production on that farmland.
Mhm.
So there's another way to do it, and then grow some other crops.
Yeah.
Agrivoltaics, that's the hot new topic, agrovoltaics.
Yeah. And the other portion, another huge portion just goes to feed more animals.
Mhm.
Right. So again, you're not really cutting the human food consumption down through that, through the solar panels.
Thank
So
you
I've
for putting
I've
that
been
word in the
encouraged to
chat.
see the various farming techniques of spacing them or doing every other plot or things like that to kind of incorporate both into the system.
Or even just allowing other crops to be grown. I know that there's a push to get hemp to be more grown here in Indiana. It's not going to be as hard on our environment, on the soil. They can get more crops at a time. I have a lot of family that's in farming. That's what they do. So it's hearing about that going, why can't we make this a reality when there's so much we can do with it? And imagine if we could also legalize marijuana and grow it here.
And I think what's not pointed out, it doesn't have to be a huge utility scale operation. Some of the community scale size are up to 5 megawatts, which is like 25 acres. And they don't have to be that big. And if a small independent farmer leases some of their fallow land that's just not very productive to that, it could keep that farm in business in perpetuity. It could keep that as a family farm. So I think that's a very important point. It is a source of income for that farmer. I like guaranteed source of income for that farmer.
Especially when farming is kind of, at least the homestead type farming, the family farms, it is a dying profession, unfortunately, with the bigger companies that are just kind of taking over.
I'd say like we can pursue multiple strategies at once, but like I'd say let's definitely try to maximize solar panels on buildings. But again, we need a policy framework to get there, and our legislature just hasn't done that. They've rolled it back with the end of net metering, and then they've, as of yet, until 2025, right? Hopefully, when we get some good enabling independent community solar legislation passed. So let's do both, I guess. Farmland, but also maximizing solar on rooftops.
Yeah, something interesting that I know has been talked about is a brownfield. And if you don't know that term, it could be an ex-coal mine, which we have lots in Southwest Indiana. Pike County is mostly brownfields. And so those have not been remediated very well, and they're a very good candidate for solar fields in an area that's not farmland. It is sort of a low conflict kind of spot to put some solar.
Now, Chris, do you
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
I was going to say, Chris, putting those in those areas where you maybe can't do as much with that land, do you think that could help bring jobs and support to communities that maybe have been impacted by some of these coal furnaces just being retired?
Yeah, 100%, because you just can't leave those folks behind. I mean, my family was in coal mining in Pike County growing up. I still have a brother-in-law who works at one of the large generating stations. So there has to be a path forward. And it seems like leadership could really help with that and develop job programs and all the above. Because there is, like I've already mentioned, a lot of federal money coming our way to do exactly that. Stand-up job programs, domestic manufacturer, all of those things that we want in Indiana. Well, let's freaking do it.
Yeah, I should point out, and because I don't want folks to get the idea that we're kind of like hating on these industries. They were essential to our way of life now, and we understand that, but we can move forward. And that's kind of the idea of a lot of the democratic platforms these days and being progressive. Like, yeah, we want to continue to evolve forward. We don't want to stay in the past. But my the way I got into consulting was from a recommendation from somebody in the coal industry, another geologist who's in the coal industry. His office was up here. We had some people in common we knew, and he connected me as I graduated. So, we're all connected to the industry in some way. And I won't forget that because it's led me to a great career, and that was a great thing to do. He didn't have to help me. And so we want to find those, replace those jobs. The other thing on the brownfields, in the mining sense, you have all the land settling that goes around with that. So it is hard to build on those. It's hard to farm on it. It's hard to do much of anything. And you would risk the loss potentially of a section of panels or something. But that's minor compared to the loss of a home or a factory or something just sinks in. So, most of the time those runs of solar panels braces, they could, they're lighter than a full building, so they're not going to put that stress on the roof of the mine, the old roof, or the sidewalls. So when people talk about brownfields a lot, usually in the sense of city life and old manufacturing, automobile manufacturing, but the coal mines are perfect. And spent time in West Virginia for work, and they have all those roof hilltops skimmed off for coal. And they're just like flat top. I mean, you just put solar as far as the eye can see up there, maybe dress them up with a little greenery so it's just not a shiny bald head like I'm showing up here. That you'd fly over West Virginia and you'd see that right now. So yeah, there's a lot of great options out there. I love to think of these engineering problems, and the more complex, the more challenging, the more rewarding.
Yeah, we have a lot of those industrial manufacturing brownfields up here in Delaware County. It's incredibly sad to see. And there are a lot of good people in Indiana doing a lot of hard work to try to reduce some of this. So, thank you to everybody on the call who has. I really appreciate you. So Katie actually asked a question in the chat about carbon sequestration. Yeah, that's a big word, right? Can you explain this in more detail? It's a term she hears a lot in conjunction with other environmental and energy concerns. This is something that I don't know a lot about either.
Sure. Carbon capture and sequestration sometimes, or carbon capture and storage, because we have to have a lot of names for things to make it more complicated, right? But we'll call it CCS. And the basic idea is capturing carbon dioxide emissions, transporting them oftentimes via pipelines, and then injecting that carbon dioxide waste deep underground and hoping that it stays there. And CAC is really opposed to CCS because it's just going to keep us reliant on fossil fuels. And there are some instances where it may be useful to decarbonize. I think cement production is one of those examples. But what we're seeing here in Indiana is not CCS being proposed for projects like that. We're seeing CCS be proposed for a project. I'll give an example outside of Terre Haute. They want to reopen an old coal mine. An old coal gasification power plant that's not producing carbon dioxide right now. So we're going to start making carbon dioxide and other toxic pollutants that won't be captured, that the community will be breathing in. And then they want to ship it 12 miles in hazardous pipelines that are under-regulated, and then inject it at a high pressure that will go underneath people's farmland. So it's not a climate solution in our view. It's not an environmental solution in our view. And communities across Indiana are, similar to LEAP, very disappointed, I think, in the fact that our legislature has passed several bills moving CCS forward here in the state, and folks feel like they haven't been communicated with about that as well.
It's very interesting. I want to bring up the word underregulated again. It's everybody needs to understand when we pull back on these kinds of regulations, this is how people die. This is how people get sick. This is how trains get derailed and pollutants go all over, our communities. So yes, underregulated. This is a huge problem in Indiana and why we are one of the worst polluted states. Did you have something to add to that, Michael? I know you came off mute real quick.
No, not really.
Okay. You did a great job of explaining it, Kelly. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
I would actually like to know, I know some of you have worked with orgs, some of you are working with orgs. What are the organizations in Indiana that are really putting the best feet forward and talking to legislators and getting legislation at least written? I think that it's important for people to know, because if that's something they want to do, if they're interested in that legislative part, we need help there.
I mean, I can talk about the League of Women Voters here in Indiana, especially in my area, the Greater Lafayette. Liz and all them, they are some of the most dedicated people I've met for environmental issues. So if people are wanting to get involved, that could be a great starting point. Especially, I know they've worked with different organizations. I think they've worked with Chris before. There's been some collaboration, so it's at least a good starting point. And then in my area, there is the different organizations dealing with the LEAP project. I will let you kind of do your research on which one you would like to join.
There is the Hoosiers for Community Solar Coalition, and you can jump onto that page and see all of the member orgs. And so there are all are working on legislation around community solar. Like, find one of those orgs that you want to help and reach out.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I just, we have so many great organizations in Indiana, but when it really boils down to is that legislation and taking action there so that we can give these organizations that are working their butts off to give us some clean air, a little room, to breathe. Let's see. Yes, of course, Citizens Action Coalition, which Kelly, thank you so much for all of the information and how can people get involved in your organization?
Sure. And I'll say, yeah, there's a great group of organizations in Indiana. So working on environmental issues, but democratic issues. I mean, so many different good causes. It's wonderful to be a part of such a great group. I will say I have the easy job. I'm not down at the State House like our executive director Kerwin and Lindsay as well. That's a tough job to be down there talking with legislators, and I appreciate them, and I appreciate everyone who is down there on the side of consumers and our environment, because it can be lonely and it can be, I think, kind of discouraging sometimes. But yeah, I'm just seeing Katie's chat here, Hoosier Environmental Council, Earth Charter Indiana, Indy Climate Club, which I think is a part of the League of Conservation Voters of Indiana, Sierra Club, Sun. There's so many great groups all across the state. So I know for us, there's always something going on and we try to tell people about it via email. So you can sign up for emails from us and from other great groups. We do texts as well, follow folks on social media. And y'all, it takes money to fight money, as I'm sure candidates know. And it only takes a little bit from a lot of people to keep up the fight. So if you've got a little bit of extra change, I used to knock on doors, we asked for change for social change. I promise you, all of it makes a big difference for nonprofits and candidates, because it takes money to fight money.
100%. And the educational aspect of it is also just as important, because without you guys being there and taking this data and sharing it with us, we don't know what to ask for, right? So it is just important to be in that educational place in all of this. I do want to say, because there was a question that popped up in the chat from Shelley, and she said, where are we on nuclear power, and are there any new plants in the pipeline? Does anybody know anything about that?
I hate to keep monopolizing the conversation, but I can speak to this unless someone else wants to.
No,
My
go
que-
ahead. I don't have any data.
Sure. So we have one nuclear power plant in Michigan that provides power to northern Indiana. It's the DC Cook nuclear power plant that Indiana Michigan Power operates. So I think that's like 11% of our state's energy portfolio. The thing I will caution folks about are small modular reactors, SMRs. There are none operating in the United States yet. There was one that they didn't begin construction on, and the estimated cost, I think, reached $7 billion. And what our legislature did a couple years ago, they passed two pieces of legislation that allow utilities to charge customers for the construction of those small modular reactors before they're fully constructed and before they're producing energy. That's not a good idea for affordable bills, and it's not a good idea in the fight against climate change where we kind of got a ticking clock because these are not yet operational. So there are other solutions that are ready right now, like solar, wind, energy efficiency, and battery storage that we should be investing in. And no utilities in Indiana have announced plans for a small modular reactor, but they are investigating it in that 20-year planning process as well.
So this is language that we all need to be listening for, right? We will hear it in legislation. Indiana seems to be one of those places where they bring this type of legislation to test it out. So let's all be mindful, let's all pay attention, because we can stop these things from happening if we work together. I want to thank the panelists so much for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your information. It was such a fun event. I learned a lot because I really do not know that much about some of this stuff, honestly. So thank you guys for that information. You can learn more about our MVP candidates and the 2024 election at MADVoters.org. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and you can follow us across all of those socials. We thank you all for spending your time with us tonight, and we look forward to sending you the video and the clips.
Thank you for having us, Chelsea.